Congratulations, Victoria, on your winning entry to the AnimChallenge theme of Monday morning. Your shot is very relatable. I'm Jacob. I'm going to take a look at your work and see how we can plus it, push it, polish it a little bit more so that you know a little bit more about me. My name is Jacob Gardner. I am the head of animation at Agora Studio, and before that I was a character animator at DreamWorks Animation for about 9 years. I'm also an instructor at ianimate.net, and I have been since the workshop started in 2010. I've taught the Feature Animation 1 course, the Creature Animation 1 course, and then Feature Animation 4 and 5, which are my favorites. They're the close-up facial acting stuff and also the full-body acting, so covering everything that you're doing in this shot you've submitted. So let's jump in and take a look and see where we can push it and have fun with it. Alright, so let's take it in stages. First, let's talk just about mechanics. Then we'll get into facial stuff afterwards. So, to start this off, in the first couple frames, the head, neck, and chest all feel very locked together. They're all moving down in screen space, so there's motion on them, but they're all very stiff in their relationships. They're all just very rigidly moving down together. And it would be a good opportunity to have some push and pull, some organic squash and stretch in there. So I would suggest taking the translate Y of the head and actually squashing down the length of the neck during this moment so that the head can go a little bit further downward than the chest does. And that difference between them will make it feel a little bit more organic. Now, it's not quite the same as just rotating the neck down, which will give the same effect in screen space. Rotating the neck will make the head move faster in screen space than the chest does. But there's also this fleshiness sort of thing that you'll get from translating the head down and actually squishing the length of the neck, which will make it feel a little bit more organic and not as rigid as a CG model that's keeping the exact same proportions and relationships. And then for this hand pose at the beginning, I feel like I would try to hide this gap here and also probably hide the end of the pinky there. If you twist the base of the pinky finger in, then maybe that would be a little bit more successful and you'd get something just more like this. And I think that would be a little bit better to hide the end there. It's just cluttering the space a bit. And then this line and this line are very parallel. Maybe there's a way to, I don't know, maybe make this more like that. No, I don't like that. Let's back up. Maybe if you keep this one the way it is, and you make this one a little bit more tilted down. Doesn't have to be much, a little bit can go a long way. And then since this is just such a soft, relaxed curve, it might be better to add a little bit more variation on the angles in there. The other one looks pretty good. I think the other hand is working pretty well. The thumb though is kind of exactly touching the edge of the index finger and touching over here. It might be good to simplify that and move it away from the index finger more, or you can have it just cover this little spot right there. But I think right now it's feeling a little bit cluttered in that section. You could simplify a little bit. I like the way that he reaches for the glass, or the cup. I think that's working pretty well. When he does, it feels very it's kind of broken up in the rotations, because it feels like for the first couple frames we see the cup, it is very rigidly straight up and down, and then at some point it just starts turning real fast. I might blend that a little bit more, ease into that turn just a bit. It also locks into place at frame 39. You could have another frame where it eases down towards his face a little bit more. You just kind of feel the spacing just freeze right there in terms of the rotations. And then it gets a little bit disconnected from the cup when he's doing the drinking motion. So his lips kind of move around on the bottom of the cup. I like that the jaw motion is in there. I think that's really cool. That feels like he's drinking because of it, but the lips moving around doesn't quite feel right. So I would counter animate the bottom lip so that it stays right about here. Or maybe counter animate the whole mouth. I mean, all lips all lip controllers, so that it stays about here and the jaw is doing some motion. You'd want a little bit of push and pull on the lips. They don't want to feel frozen, but right now there's too much motion, and so it doesn't feel like they're staying connected to where the liquid would actually come out of the cup. Alright, and then on the throw. So the spacing of the cup on the throw needs to feel very fluid. As he lets go of it, the spacing is going to be increasing as the cup starts moving faster. Right now what happens is that the spacing of the cup from here to here is a pretty big spacing gap, especially when you consider the small one right before that. So small spacing gap to 65, bigger spacing gap after that, and then small spacing gap. And so I would expect that here it would continue moving fast, and the next one would be like here. To go from here to, maybe this is a little too far, but the spacing would be increasing as he's throwing it. Right now, because of the pause in the spacing, it's actually making it feel like it goes real fast and then slows down and then speeds up again. Also with the rotations, between 65 and 66, the rotation feels locked. It just translates. It's the same shape on screen, it just translates through space, and then rotates a ton right after that. So I would ease into that as well. Maybe this frame needs to be rotated a little bit further. You could probably then start removing every other frame, because it does fall kind of slowly. So maybe you get rid of this frame. Maybe 67 you lose, you go straight into 68. So you would go from 66 to 68, get rid of 69 and use 70, get rid of 71 and use 72, get rid of 73 and use 74. And that will keep the spacing moving a little faster because you'll skip that one real problem frame where it pauses before it jumps forward again. And then it'll also make it feel like the speed at which he throws it maintains its velocity as it goes out the car. Right now, the spacing gap here from 65 to 66 is making it feel like that throw is going to be really fast. You could also work backwards a little bit if you want the throw to remain similar to what it is, or the exiting the car to remain similar to what it is. Maybe you'd have to rework some of the spacing in here so that this spacing gap is not that big. Maybe add a couple frames in here. Maybe something between these two options is your best bet, because you don't want it to feel too slow, but you also want it to be able to read the object as it exits frame, because it's already really close to the edge of frame and you're not getting a ton of readability on it, especially if you remove more frames. So there's a balancing act to be had here of working the spacing so that it continues on the right path, being like a bouncing ball that's been thrown in the air, versus feeling like it stops when it gets to the top of the arc before he releases it. So you'll find a middle ground in there by reworking some spacing throughout that motion. And then for the mechanics of the chest, neck, and head in here. In general, I think the chest, neck, and head are working pretty well. I think it feels fleshy. There's some nice weight to a lot of the things you're doing. I think the throw is a little overplayed, though. So when he throws it, he uses his whole body and kind of goes that direction. And I think it would be simpler and a little clearer, too, if he stays in something more like this. He stays up here and then tosses it while maintaining something much closer to this pose instead of using his body and throwing out that way with his body and his head. It feels a little too over the top. So I would suggest having him do this and then chuck it from here. Or if you want to do an under arc and throw like that instead of, I think I just did over the top, you could still go under and chuck it like that, but maintain a similar pose to what you have up here at the top of the drink. Or you could just have him settle down into this. Basically this for the chest, neck, and head. Even the face that he drops into this as he throws it, but not doing that and coming back. And then I think this anticipation here is a little too big. Not this one. This one's great. this one, the anticipation to the anticipation, is a little too big. I think if he, I guess it kind of confuses me when I first watched it about what he was doing. If you have him stay more like here, and then he just goes to lift his head back and slam it down, I think that'll be more successful. Having this quite large anticipation to the anticipation, I think clutters the motion and confuses me a little bit about what he's doing. So if he's like this, and then he goes into that, I think that works a little bit better than having him go down first, then back, and then do that. It's just one too many things, and I think it would be clearer if you kept him up near the top. Remove that, get to here. This is great. I love the way you're stretching his face. That's fun. If possible, I know smears are difficult in CG because you can't always achieve this, but if you can make it so that the path of this smear feels a little bit more like the arc that his head takes, it'll be more successful. Right now, it's all just this one line, which makes it feel like his head is coming from up here, maybe. It's just traveling on this straight path. So what you want to try, if you have control over the hair maybe, or the top of the head, is he's actually coming from back here. So you could try to make the hair point back a little bit. Maybe even get a little bit of that feeling in his upper head too, so that the skull is kind of dragging that way a bit more, rather than the straight line. Actually, we could probably go a little bit further with the hair. Maybe basically you want this sort of idea. Yeah, that feels better. So this is just that straight line, and this curvature added to the smear frame will help improve the readability of that shape through that smear. And it also gives some directionality to this motion as a single frame, which will be cool. So here I'm wondering about the crashing of the head through the steering wheel. It might be a little too far, but then again, I don't know what his hair actually does. Maybe this is touching his forehead exactly, but his hair is just over the top of the steering wheel, which should be fine. All right, so mechanically, the car doesn't quite react in a way that I would expect. I think it waits one frame and then bounces straight up. It does a little bit of a bounce just in translation. It might be good to add a little bit of rotation on the car as well, from somewhere near the bottom of the chassis. It also might be good to add some tension to the hands in this moment. Like the fingers tighten up, compress against the steering wheel a little bit tighter. Right here, this hand feels very relaxed. So it might be cool to just add some tension there as he yanks his head into the steering wheel. You could also, instead of, I think I was acting out doing this, but you also could just tighten into a much tighter fist. That would achieve a similar sort of tension. This is very fun. You might be able to remove this frame. Maybe just go straight from here to here. That might work well for a couple of reasons. One, if you look at the spacing of, like, let's say the eyes, it kind of feels like it's slowing down. Think of a bouncing ball landing to the floor. You would want the spacing to be increasing up until that moment of impact. And so here, we have his eyes here, and then here, and then here, and then it's at the contact pose. So it feels like it's slowing down because of this one extra frame. So if we go back to the ball thing, it's like we've added a frame right here. And so it feels like it's slowing down as it approaches the impact. So if you get rid of this frame entirely, and just go straight from here to here, I think that might be more successful. Additionally, if you look at the nose, here, it actually goes under its final position and comes back. So it's kind of overshooting, which I don't think you want when you want this really impactful slam into one position. You don't want to overshoot the nose position and make it feel like it's this nice arc that happens because of that. You want it to just stop hard. All right, and then similar things here. I think it's slowing down a little too much. You might be able to get rid of both this frame and this frame, but that would really be a thing that you have to feel out. I would try just removing this one and go from here to here, or try going from here to here and see what kind of effect you get. Maybe that's too much. Maybe that's pushing it too far if we remove two. But I definitely think that in this one it feels like it's slowing down a lot before it impacts. Now here, when he lifts his head up, I think this is where it starts to feel like the head, neck, and chest are disconnected from each other. I think the neck is doing a little too much back and forth, and it's just making the head feel like it translates from side to side. And there's not enough rotation on the head to support this like sort of idea. It feels like it translates instead, which is very uncomfortable, I think, and also feels a little bit too stiff and CG. And then you could also add a little bit more, I guess, reaction from the chest. Because of him doing this, it's going to impact the chest a little bit more. It's going to make the chest maybe go left and right a little bit. Or you could play with how it shimmies up his spine. It feels a little bit stiff right now. And then coming down into this, I think this is a problem mechanic that I don't quite understand this action. And so I think we can solve it pretty simply. What I think is happening is that, for one, there's a really big spacing gap right there. So from the top of his motion, he's kind of coming out of that thing, and then he starts to come down and then pops really far one direction and then slows down again. So you've got a big spacing gap right here. If you watch the nose or the chin, boom. And then he gets into a nicer arc. But an even bigger problem, and it's more about the intent of what's being shown here, is that it's all forward. And that's the exact same thing he just did to hit his head into the steering wheel. And so from the side view, I think he's going like this, and then like that. And that's such a similar action to what you just showed that it's confusing things a little bit. Instead, I would have him go and make it mostly vertical instead of forward. And I think that'll change up the motion enough that it's not going to be repetitive, and it's going to be clearly a new action that I think is similar or closer to what it is that you're going for, which is this kind of deflation. I have to go now. And I think that'll work better. So I wouldn't hunch him over as much. I wouldn't put his neck as far. I would translate his head down into his shoulders and have everything kind of droop just down into this pure deflation. That's a little bit more vertical. There's a little bit of forward to it, but it's not like that. I'd say it's mostly a vertical action. Cool. And then here, it feels like his head and his hands start moving at the same time. Or his neck, I guess, technically starts going that way, and his hand starts lifting up at the same time. I would offset them just a little bit more so it doesn't feel like they start at the same frame. And this motion as he leans out is very stiff chest, neck, and head. Maybe you could push the head to be a little bit faster so that it's leading this action a bit more. Or you could drag it a bit more. Whichever makes sense for what it is you're trying to show. But right now it feels like it's directly just a piece of wood all the way up through him that translates together, rotates together. For the mechanics of this hand actually coming off the steering wheel, it feels a little bit floaty, a little bit too IK-like. I think I can tell that the translates of the hand are kind of stuck while the rotates are doing their own thing. So that makes it feel kind of IK-ish, that it's the relationship of the rotation of the wrist versus the placement of the wrist doesn't quite feel like mechanically accurate for our anatomy and the way that we would move that. And also the spacing is a little even. That's what I meant by when I said it's a little floaty. The spacing feels very even on the wrist turn. I think your poses are nice. I think this hand pose is working pretty well. And then opening the door is good. Getting out of the door is good. I like the briefcase idea. How he's dragging it out and then it just kind of falls off of the seat, which is pretty cool. I would try not to show any of it in here and in here, just because it's this kind of floating object that goes by. It's a little bit confusing. I would start showing it like here. This is great. So try and avoid having it show up here. Just have it come up from down there. So in like this frame, maybe just lower it so that's not quite there. Maybe like that. And then this frame, same thing, is that we start seeing it here instead of on the other side of the steering wheel. He's not quite grabbing onto it here. And maybe this finger is. It's hard to tell without the lighting or anything, but I would maybe make a stronger pose there where it feels like this finger is going up underneath it, underneath the handle. Like that. And then I love the violence with which he closes the door. You could probably strengthen these poses here. So the sole of the foot is at this angle, and then here, same exact angle. And then it kind of moves all as one. And it doesn't quite feel like it's contacting the whole door there. Maybe it is, it's just hard to tell without shadows, but perhaps instead you could have it feel like there's a lot of pressure here by pushing on the toes, so you get this line break like that. And then I guess you'd want this to be in the same place between these. You would probably want this to feel like it's connected on both frames, so it would stay there. And then I didn't do a great job of making it stay there. It's kind of drifting on the door there, but having it feel like the heel then slams down on that last frame might be cool. And then another note here on the car, just that it feels like he's putting so much pressure on it to screen left, but it bounces up and down. So I would definitely add some rotation on the chassis of the car so that that force is felt with the momentum going into the car sideways, so that it rocks back and forth like that instead of jumping up and down. Okay, let's talk about, one other thing. The shoulders feel a little bit stiff when he gets out. I wonder if as he's getting out, I would start lowering this shoulder more. And then as he pulls on the briefcase, might raise the shoulder up. If you have control of the bend controllers, like the middle of the arm, if you can move this section of the arm to bend it a little bit more, I might try that, because this swoop isn't really helping the weight of this pull and the line of this pose. You might want it to be a little bit more like that if you can. I think this swoop is really the problem. Alright, so then Let's talk about the face. I like a lot of what you're doing here. I think the deflating of the brows and lids here is good. The graphic choice to have a straight upper lid is really nice. There's a couple places where you lose it a little bit and maybe you could push further to getting that straight upper lid, but this is working really nice here. The nose drifts a lot right here, especially like this connection to the cheek. It moves down really far and then it moves up by itself, seemingly. I would, and maybe this is what you're doing, I see a hint of it in there. I would take a pass at connecting the nostril connection of the cheek to the corner of the mouth. And so when that goes up, the nostril goes up. When that goes wide, the nostril goes wide. Now it's kind of doing that here because the corner is kind of moving up, but the nostril is moving up faster and bigger than it. I would go the other way. I would make the nostril move up slower and not quite as influenced. Right now it feels like the nostril's leading the action. I would make this nostril motion in this sort of thing much more secondary, like it's being pulled around by the corner of the mouth. I think you're missing an opportunity here when he looks down at the cup to really have his eyelids low, and like he's just barely keeping them open as he looks down at the cup. I think that would be nice, but also I noticed that the eyes look like they're looking in two different directions. This one feels like it's looking down here, and this one feels like it's kind of looking at me. It's coming like right at camera. I think you probably have to push it a little bit further away from us and a little bit lower. And so then if you have the eyelids really far low here and then he rolls his eyes up like he does here, I think that would be really cool. Right now, the lids mostly stay in the same place, but the pupils move, and you'd want to connect the lids to the pupil movement as well so it feels nice and fleshy. I talked about the lips connected to the cup here, but also his upper face is a little bit dead during the drinking. I wouldn't suggest a big pose change. You don't want it to be anything major, but just a little bit of life might be good. Maybe relaxing the brows down a couple pixels just so that they kind of come down, kind of like what you're doing in the beginning, but 50% of that. Just a little bit of life there while he's drinking might be good. Now here I think the lids are a little too low, or the pupils are a little too high. I like the idea of the way you're cutting off the pupil, but I think it's just too much. We lose him entirely. Talked about that. I'm not quite sure of his emotional state here after the first hit. I like the furrowing of the brows, but I wonder if you could push it further. Should he be like squinching up his cheeks and his eyes as well? His brows feel furrowed, but his eyes feel very relaxed. His cheeks feel very relaxed. And so it's just a question. I don't know if he should or not. But if you want him to feel more relaxed, maybe you could relax the brows as well. Oh, we talked about removing those frames. So here's a case where you're kind of switching his favoring of the brows. You're favoring to screen right, and then here you're favoring to screen left. And that always feels a little bit weird, like when you can't choose which side you're trying to favor on. I would maybe keep it a little bit more consistent. Choose one side to favor on for this motion and keep it there. And then in that is where I think that you might be losing the flat upper lid idea. It's a little rounded. You're almost getting an oval here. So I might push it back, challenge you to make it more of that graphic idea that you had in there at the beginning. I like the way he can't get his eyes quite open yet. It's looking good. So in here, there's some weirdness going on, like things feel like they're sliding a little bit. The pupils and the upper lids feel parented to each other when they lift up. So they're moving at exactly the same rate to go up. And so are his lower lids, kind of. But the brows are coming down. And so there's just this weird sliding where things don't feel connected. And then in here, the lids, upper lid and the brow feel parented to each other. They're moving kind of at the same rate every frame. So I'd make a choice about which one's leading, which one's following. Are the eyes closing faster than the brows, or are the brows really diving down fast and pushing the eyes closed almost? Whichever one it is, make the spacing a little bit faster, a little bit bigger on that object. Make the other one more separated from them so that it's not feeling like they're moving in unison. So here, I don't quite understand this. I'm guessing he's looking in the rear view mirror and he sees himself and he's trying to put on a fake smile. I don't quite get that. Maybe if you had a tiny extra beat in there where he sees it first and then he tries to smile into it. But right now, it happens all at once where he like does everything together, where he sees the mirror and tries to smile into it all at the same time. Which might have been your intention, but I don't think it's coming across super readable at the moment. And so what I'm thinking might be more clear is if he sees it first and then kind of lifts his head up and smiles into it after he notices it, after he looks to the mirror. And then this shape in general isn't as appealing as it could be. I think there's some wobbliness in your lip shape, and maybe you could get a bit more of a point on there, unless your goal is to make it really rounded, in which case I would say push it even more and get like that. Same thing on the other side, maybe. And then I think the lower lids are too low. It feels like there's too much white here. Maybe push those low, but I like that you're not engaging the cheeks a lot and it's not pushing up on the lower lids, so it doesn't feel like a genuine smile. It feels like a forced smile, which is nice. But another thing that's really a bit strange about this pose is how much distance there is between the upper lid and the eye ring. There's also the same amount of distance from the upper lid to the eye ring to the brow. So you've kind of got these equidistant gaps in there, and it's not super appealing. Same thing on this side. They're about equidistant apart from each other. But he's also looking up, so I feel like his lids would be getting much closer to the upper ring of the eye. So if that's the case, I would maybe lift the lids up a little bit higher, but I also know you want to keep him sleepier. So I would maybe bring down the eye ring, or the eye socket, whatever you want to call it. And then you have a bigger gap from the eye socket to the brow, and a smaller gap from the lid to the socket, which is good. So it'll be a little bit more appealing. Those parallel lines with the equidistant spacing isn't as appealing or organic as it could be. That's more machine-like, more rigid. You have one frame of his eyes darting really fast down to the door of the car. So I might soften that by an extra frame. Maybe take this one and ease it back by 10-15%, and then on the next frame hit your final pose. Also, I feel like this eye probably has to go further into the corner, similar to this one, so that it feels like he's looking off this way. Right now, you're running the risk of this feeling like it's coming a little bit more at us, and this one being over there, so they don't quite look like they're looking in the same direction. And I feel like you could get a little bit more life on the face as he pushes the door open. Maybe he closes his eyes a little bit. Maybe he squeezes down his brows a little bit more as he pushes open the door. And then you get into this face. The eyes here are working pretty well for your intent. I think you could push the brows a little bit more asymmetrical to open up towards that side. And then the mouth feels a little bit inconsistent between both sides of the face. I think this side is working pretty well. This side is not doing something that feels equal or similar. I would probably round the edges a little bit more on the other side instead of coming to a point. You've got one side coming to a point and one side really rounded. It doesn't quite sync up to me. Now this feels better. This is an interesting way here. This one isn't super rounded. You have the flatter lower lip here. Like the previous one felt a little bit more like, if we include the point like this with the rounded edge. Those are supposed to be teeth. Let's take those out. And then now you've got one that has this sharp corner at the bottom, which also I think works. I think this change of direction is nice. This is also nice for different reasons. And I think that I would suggest choose one and stick with it a little bit more. I think they both can work. They're both successful shapes in their own way, but I don't know if they go together like that. I think you could maybe simplify the end shape just a bit so that it's maybe just one line instead of having this kind of seagull shape, like a flying seagull. Go back to the beginning here. I think you're keeping the face really fleshy overall, which is nice. I like the jiggle that you've got when he shakes his head. I think that's working pretty well. You're making the jaw nice and loose, which is cool. There's a bit of a spacing thing there. So if you track the spacing of the jaw and the mouth, it's working pretty well up until frame 142. It's kind of got this nice fluid path, and it's kind of on its way up this way, and then this kind of breaks things. I think here maybe you need to keep that a little bit more to this side, and the mouth would have to be a little higher. I think that would work. Yeah. Cool. So, I think this makes me laugh every time I see it at full speed too. He's doing a little bit. I just noticed this. There's kind of these dancing fingers over here. I might remove the dancing part of it and just go for that compression when he tightens and pulls his head into the steering wheel. Anyway, I think this is a good place to wrap it up and say, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. But I think that this is going to give you enough to go on if you want to address any of these things or just take these suggestions into the next piece you make. Okay? Thanks a lot, and good luck. Happy animating. Bye-bye.